Harvesting the nation's renewable resources will require a giant build-out of long-distance transmission facilities from the windswept Midwest and the desert Southwest to urban users. Or will it? That was the issue today, debated at a transmission policy conference in Washington, D.C. Our executive editor, Margaret Ryan, was there. Sounds like it was interesting.
It was, Susan. The top Obama administrations have repeatedly stressed the need for a green superhighway. That's a high-voltage power lines to efficiently bring wind and solar power from remote regions to urban consumers. The big issues? Siting and cost. Whose backyard should those lines go through, and who should pay for giant interstate projects costing $1 to $10 million a mile? Well, Interior Secretary Ken Salazar told the Energy Daily conference today the Obama administration is tackling the problem at the highest levels.
We have assembled a cabinet-level working group focused on developing a coordinated approach for moving energy around the country. In the regular meetings we now hold at the cabinet level with the Council on Environmental Quality, the Office of Energy and Climate Change, the Department of Energy and the Department of Agriculture and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and others, we are assembling a unified forward-looking strategy for siting, cost allocation, and coordinating the permitting for proposed projects for transmission.
And Salazar says his department is doing its bit, accelerating review of projects that need rights-of-way across federal lands.
To get our grid under construction as soon as possible, we have focused on fast-tracking the projects that we believe at Interior are ready to go. Especially now with millions of Americans out of work, we have to get moving on the transmission proposals before us so that we can get them online in the quickest possible way. The Bureau of Land Management today is currently processing 30 applications for major transmission rights-of-way on public lands which we oversee. 7 of these projects are fast-track projects in Idaho, California, and Nevada. We anticipate these projects will clear the permitting process before the end of next year. That will give them time to qualify for incentives that are included in the Economic Recovery Act.
But Ralph Izzo, chairman of utility PSEG, says the superhighway approach would socialize, his words, the cost of more expensive renewables on the East Coast and could endanger public support for renewables. Better, he says, for the federal government to put a price on carbon, enact a national renewable portfolio standard, and then stand back and let the markets work.
Let's be honest with ourselves and the American public. The perceived absence of a transmission superhighway is not the biggest obstacle to development of renewable energy. Renewable energy is simply not competitive with fossil fuel-fired electric generation absent a price on carbon. Even then, I would suggest that it is doubtful that we would want the price of carbon to rise to the point of justifying most renewable energy supplies. This from a company that's investing $1 billion in renewable energy. Rather, to begin to capture the long-term benefits of renewable energy, we must enact a renewable portfolio standard on a national level.
Now, FERC Chairman Jon Wellinghoff said wind and solar resources are location constrained. They can't move closer to load like other resources can. So he sees a necessary federal role in both siting and allocating costs to ratepayers in multiple states.
Without additional federal siting authority, I believe that it is unlikely that we will be able to achieve our nation's energy goals. Federal siting authority would be helpful even if limited only to situations in which states have had an opportunity to address a proposal in the first instance, and to transmission facilities that are primarily for moving renewable energy resources. Renewable energy resources such as wind, solar, and geothermal are often found in large quantities at dispersed locations remote from load centers. For this reason, there are often significant costs associated with building the transmission facilities needed to deliver the project from such remote resources. If the resource developer or the host utility is compelled to bear all of the cost of these transmission facilities, regardless of the benefits to others, it is less likely that the resources in fact will be developed.
Now, former FERC Chairman Joseph Kelleher said he differs with Izzo because Western wind and solar resources are simply far better resources than those found along the East Coast. He said developing them, the ones in the East, will mean higher cost and less efficient renewables, not lower cost ones.
So, Margaret, is Ralph Izzo certainly not the first one to question this long-distance transmission?
No, he's not. He was kind of echoing the northeastern governors. You may remember back in May, 10 governors got together. They wrote a letter to Salazar, in fact. They were protesting these federal subsidies, effectively, all this help for big transmission lines for Midwestern wind. They said this is going to stunt growth in the East because we're going to have to pay for that. We won't be able to afford to invest in particularly offshore wind. Now, Kelleher told a conference today he thought the governors were really concerned about jobs because they wanted the manufacturing facilities located in their states. He said that was their real concern. And Izzo specifically said, you know, no, I don't really think that's the big thing. Renewables are an above market solution. He said they cost less if you can do it closer to home. And he said don't stifle regional development with this centralized planning effort.
But does Izzo agree that that approach could hurt the development of renewables?
Well, the ones in the big things we're talking about in the Dakotas, the big centralized solar and wind stuff, yes. I asked him that specifically, in fact, and he said if nothing changes, yes, in fact, it could. He said what gets developed will be determined by the carbon price and by the renewable portfolio standard, whatever we have one, if we have one. He said, look, New Jersey has a renewable standard of 20% for renewable power by 2020. And I said, well, can you get that all locally? Is that what you're saying? He said, no, I don't think we can. He said, but I can't say where we're going to get it. I don't know if we'll have to go to the Adirondacks or we'll have to go to the Dakotas. Right. We don't know where the technology and the economics are going to be, and we shouldn't predetermine that by, again, he called it a centralized planning effort.
So he's not opposed to long-distance transmission, but he does think it will be used less.
Well, he says that it ought to be built if it's the best, if it's the most efficient way to get renewables. If the market's, well, by definition, if it's the most efficient, the market will support it.
Okay, Margaret Ryan, thank you. Interesting.